This is CHSR 97.9 FM here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. This is Python's Paradise, your film and music show, and this is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena. And folks, I have a return guest, a director who's been here in Fredericton. In fact, he shot a film here called Frozen with Fear with Bo Derek back in, I believe, it was 1999. And, Fredericton loves him, and he loves us. Folks, I give you the wonderfully talented director of Prom Night, among other things, Paul Lynch. How you do, Paul?
Very well, no complaints. And had it not been for the winter weather, I would quite happily make New Brunswick my retirement home. But the winter weather, cannot take anymore after sitting in Sunshine Land for so long. So I go back and forth to Toronto and to British Columbia, Vancouver, and Kelowna. And when I'm up there in the winter, it's just too much for me.
Yeah, I hear ya. I've told this story before. There was I think it was last year. We had a winter that was so bad. Like, I was doing an interview here at night, and I got out of here at midnight, and the snow was coming down hard. It took me like 10 minutes just to get out of the parking lot. And then when I woke up the following morning, the snow was up to the door locks on our cars. And I'm like, whoa. So I get ya.
It's just the one part of Canada that I have a problem with, nothing else, just the weather. It's sometimes, I was once in Edmonton when it was like 30 below zero. So once you've been through it, you've been through it. So 10 below zero isn't that bad, but I really, if I can avoid it, I will. So there you go.
You did Frozen with Fear here. I know we touched upon this a little last time that we talked, but talk about some of your experiences here in Fredericton shooting that film.
Well, just that there's nothing really remarkable. It was just that it was very easy. It was very nice. It was easy to get around, which I can't say about a lot of other places, including, strangely enough, Kelowna, which is like wall-to-wall traffic now. 99 at least, that was not the case over there. So it was easy to get from A to B. It was like a small town. It was really quite wonderful to be there, because it was really simple. And now, over 20 years, wherever you go, probably even there, there's lots of traffic and things like that. But the people were very gracious. We had great locations. We had a crew that came in from Quebec for the most part, but then picked up a lot of people to train. New Brunswick, so that was nice. And yeah, it was a very terrific experience. Film turned out well. It's one of those good ones that I've been lucky enough to have for most of my life.
I had a guest on here named Rob Pennock, who goes by Uncle Rob on one of the radio stations here. He's a DJ, but he was showing Bo Derek around town and sticking around with her. I don't know whether he was part of your film or not, but I know he was in a film that Catherine Mary Stewart was in Moncton, but he spoke highly of it. Do you remember him?
Not offhand, no.
No. Great guy. I've had him on a couple of times. What was Bo Derek's experience like here? Do you know?
I'm sure it was fine. She was a very smart woman. She read books all the time. She was an avid reader. Mm-hmm. And it was only like maybe a year, less than 2 years after her husband passed on. So it was kind of tough for her, since he didn't leave her well off by any means. She had to go to work right afterwards and try to find work. But she was a terrific actress. She had really learned her stuff, and she did a very good job. And what got me, she was quite smart. She does not the impression I didn't think people had of her, but she was. And she was making, she had to go out to work and make a living, and she did. And now she's living with her horses up in Northern California. I just saw something about her a few months ago.
Yeah, she was a quote-unquote 10 in the Dudley Moore movie, and boy, what a gorgeous woman.
Well, yeah, she aged very well. She's still very, very attractive. And Wayne Rogers was the co-star, and he sadly passed on too early. He was a very nice, again, a very smart guy, because he had got to the point where when he did the movie, he was doing it as a hobby because he had a very, very successful financial advisement firm in L.A.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? It was nice to have you down here, and I remember that very well. I wasn't there, but I know my younger brother worked at Mark's Work Warehouse at the time, and he said that Bo Derek had come in there, and he doesn't know whether you were there or not, but he remembers she came in there, and he doesn't work there now, but he spoke of it at the time.
Yeah, no. She had a lot of time to see the town in between working, because they brought her in early because she did some scenes up front and some scenes in the end, so she had time to check out the place. But no, she was very nice. It was a very good cast and crew across the board, and to this day, there was the other actor in it was Stephen. Can't think of his last name. He was a Canadian actor, terrific guy. Seems to have disappeared off the planet as often actors do. But while he was there, he decided, he was also a painter, and he's had a couple of shows. He had one in L.A. as a painter, and he decided to do me a painting, which to this day sits on my wall because it was such a nice painting. So that I can't help but look at it and think of New Brunswick. Because he gave it to me to bring back, but then when I came back here, he came to L.A. and he said, "You got to get that framed." So he came with me and we framed it, and so it goes with me everywhere now. So that was the other big plus of going to get this beautiful, huge painting for my wall, courtesy of being in New Brunswick. So there you go.
Yeah, I miss the tax shelter era of Canadian film. A lot of really great movies come out then, especially in horror films and screwball comedies, and I didn't know this, but I learned recently that when they made those films, you were allowed two outsiders, like non-Canadians, be part of your film. Where did that come up?
I have no idea, but originally the idea was, like with the music business, was to give Canadians a chance in the world. And it's succeeding magnificently. The best thing Canada ever did was put their money behind the music business and the film business with the CRTC and things like that. And Phil Junot, I think I'm trying to think of his first name. I can't think of it. Junot was the guy in Quebec who started it all in the 60s with music. And the amount of major musicians and stars that have come out of Canada over the last 20 years is staggering. I mean, almost every actor down here started in Canada, and they're all on TV shows and everything else, and they're either making them down here or making them back in Canada, one of the two, or somewhere, or in Lithuania, which is, another popular place to make these TV series and movies now. So it was an absolutely terrific thing to do because it has just driven the Canadian content down here. I mean, one of the big stars down here, one of the biggest stars is Ryan Reynolds.
I just watched him yesterday in Deadpool 2.
And one of the biggest stars just preceding him, because he's kind of taking over, was Keanu Reeves. Mm-hmm. I mean, and then came
Ryan Gosling.
What? Ryan Gosling. I mean, you name the major stars. There's actors and actresses endlessly from Canada down here. There was the girl who was just indicted for being part of some cult somewhere, who was a star on a Warner Brothers show up there for years, the Superman show they did.
Alison Mack?
Huh?
Was it Alison Mack? Yeah.
You wouldn't think about her being Canadian or not until she was involved in this cult. That's the only way you realize that most of the people working down here in television and film are Canadian when something happens to them. Other than that, they just come down here, get the parts, and go ahead. There was the girl off Lost was from Alberta, and she's now the co-lead in a picture that's coming out this month. I mean, it's just endless. And that was the Canadian government stepping in and saying, we'll partner with you to develop an industry, a new industry. And they did. And now they've got a mega industry across Canada making product for mostly foreigners, but so what? I mean, that's what any industry does, is export their stuff, and that's what they've been doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. But man, I miss at the times when there was strictly, Canadian films. Like we talk, a lot of the horror films like or thrillers like Class of 1984, Prom Night, Curtains, or the screwball comedies like Meatballs and Porky's, and stuff like Black Christmas,
But I think you're going to see a smaller version of all of that with Netflix and Hulu and all of those, because these people are now buying product in the country they're from. So even though they distribute it around the world, they will buy a fair amount of Canadian stuff. Now, there isn't the excitement there was, because you have to go back to like 78, 79, when it really got going, and it was like the silent era in America. I mean, in 1915, everybody was building theaters and making movies. Well, in Canada, by 1979, 1980, everybody was making movies in Canada, and then they had a 10-year run, and then it went from movies to television right through the beginning of 2000. Now it's calmed down a little bit, and they're making less Canadian product, but they're making less American product, too. Remember, it started when TV series of any kind used to make 39 episodes a year in the late 50s, early 60s. Then it came down sometime in the late 60s, early 70s to 24 episodes a year. Now it's down to between 8 and 13 episodes a year. So the whole face of the media has changed, and that's what's changed Canada. Not if it was still doing what they were doing back in, let's say, 95. If there was still that business, then Canada would still be roaring along. But it isn't. The whole thing has changed. But they still do an immense amount of that in Canada, shooting in Canada.
Absolutely.
They build crews. They build everything. They now have a functioning, which they didn't have when I was making films in the 70s. You had to piece a crew together, because there wasn't, outside of some TV stations, there wasn't a lot of film crews. Now every province has mega film crews with mega people, and they do primarily. Telefilm keeps the film business alive up there. They have screenings down here once every year from new Canadian films, mostly from Quebec. And Quebec still is the leader in making independent films, because they make them for a different audience. So their audience is not like the English-speaking audience for the most part. It's the French-speaking audience, and their view of life is completely different. So they're much more interesting films. And so they tend to keep making those films, and then they'll make, I guess they must make about 10 or 15 a year, because there's a real market for them in Quebec. There's no loss in Quebec, because they sell them foreign, and Quebec goes to see their own movies, because, if you spoke a certain language and they made it in that language, you'd go too. But in English Canada, there's too much competition. I mean, they've got, films from around the world in English, so the Canadian films really somehow have to be to ride above it. And it's hard, because the Ron Reynolds of the world don't go back often. There's no reason for them to. And so it's hard for those films to really travel much. I get some of them down here, some of the idiosyncratic Canadian films, which are just interesting, but there's not a big market seemingly for them. There was one with some years ago with 3 girls, kind of a Coen Brothers movie made by a writer-director on the West Coast. And it was Concrete Blondes, I think was the title. And it's a truly terrific movie. It's incredibly entertaining. It had one American girl, the rest were, I think, all Canadian. And I don't know what happened to the person who made it, because it was first rate. It was a really entertaining Coen Brothers-like movie. But because it didn't have stars in it, this girl was a TV star, the girl who was in it, it didn't travel. Because now it doesn't really matter what the film is, as long as you've got stars.
I was wondering...
Paramount backed
Darren
Aronofsky, who is a fine director, but his mind doesn't always work right, and his girlfriend at the time, Jennifer Lawrence, because they heard Aronofsky had won an Oscar, and Jennifer Lawrence, and I don't think they read Mother, his newest script.
Oh, that was horrible.
Which was one of the most appalling films ever made. I mean, Jennifer Lawrence, as always, was sensational in it. I know why she did it. She was sensational. I mean, she did things that most actresses wouldn't do, and secondly, did them brilliantly and kept you rooted in reality in a film that made no sense whatsoever. I mean, she didn't get nominated because the film was so horrendous and didn't do any business, but it was a pity, because she was fabulous in that picture. I mean, I can see why she did it from the beginning to the end. And she kept it up. Everything she did was real. in a world of insanity. And you watch it, and you're just amazed at how brilliant an actress she is doing this. The film itself was almost unwatchable and didn't make much sense. But they simply signed up because they had her and him, and they could sell it in the rest of the world, and not lose any money. That's the way films are made today.
Yeah, she did get nominated for a Razzie. She did get nominated for a Razzie.
I don't know why. I don't know why. That's very unfair because the most of the critics now are idiots. There aren't a lot of good film critics around. The best one that I find is the guy who writes for New York magazine, and he's very good. The rest are just
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of Mother at all. Yeah,
there certainly isn't the kind of film criticism around, nor is it really required. There was around in the 60s and 70s because they're not making those kind of films, or they make the rare films. Most of the films now, if they are at anywhere unique or about something, are foreign films. Because America and Europe did a very, very good job of pointing out all the flaws in the countries since 1960 to about 2000. But by then, all the things that they were standing up against were in the process of being changed. So whether it was, I remember in the 60s there was a show called Kathy Come Home about looking for housing, for people looking for housing in London, and then the spin-off from that, Poor Cow, which was a motion picture, the same thing. It was about disenfranchised people and their lives, and they did a great job explaining this to the populace and changing it and seeding change. And whether you say it's straight out of Compton or what have you, when you go back to which they've just remade, a film about a cocaine dealer in New York, which was made in the early 70s. It's very successful. I can't think of the name of it, but they just remade it. When you go back to that, and everything had to be tinged with violence or something, or crime or something for a black film to survive. Now you've got the reverse. You've got Tyler Perry and you've got Straight Outta Compton. And, I mean, a huge market was developed. And also, a lot of the problems, you don't solve problems with films, but you point them out, and you hope people will respond. Well, now they are. So we've responded to almost everything. I was watching, which I do recommend as a very, very good series, Pose, on TV. And they've cut across gender lines like nobody ever could have imagined. That you would be watching what they do on Pose, which is a character. It's about disenfranchised people. People can write it up to being about gay people or guys in dresses, but it's not. It's about disenfranchised people of every stripe. I mean, in that case, they go to New York to try to do better for themselves in a dance club in a dress. But you could take an ordinary person who doesn't have much of a chance in life and send him to a new city and have the same thing happen and the same problems. And they're outlining all of this and making it acceptable for people to deal with these things. So we've pretty well we've still got a long way to go, but we've at least outlined everything. They haven't done that overseas. So when you get some pictures from the Mideast, some movies and things like that, you realize how incredibly lucky you are to live in North America or Europe when you see how they live. Take Syria, for instance, or Iran, when you see how they live over there. And that's the new big kind of boom in theatrical films. If there is one, it's films coming from outside to show the world's problems to the very comfortable Americans and Europeans.
I'm just wondering, how well was Bon Cop, Bad Cop, or the Trailer Park Boys movies received in the United States? Do you know?
I don't think the Trailer Park movies are movies down here. They're a TV series. They're a TV show.
Okay.
What was the other one you said?
Bon Cop, Bad Cop.
Never, as far as I know, never appeared. It was in French, wasn't it?
French and English.
Oh, it was in English, okay.
It was both, yeah. It was a bilingual film.
I don't think I've seen a Good Cop, Bad Cop down here. It was a good movie. I saw it in Canada, but I haven't seen it down here.
You see, that's unfortunate because it's fantastic.
What?
It's a fantastic movie. Like, I think it's better than a lot of the action movies I see come out of.
It doesn't have an American star in it. If you don't have an American name, nobody cares how good the movie is. That's an illusion. The people in the studios see it, and it can be the greatest thing ever. They're not going to touch it unless it's got a name.
Oh,
How do you explain that to people with the competition they've got? Yeah, this is fantastic. There was one. My best example is this, and this was 20 years ago. Let me see. It was like 95 or 96. There was a terrific movie with Jack Nicholson and Michael Caine. and they were two old guys who get involved in something in Miami Beach, and it was just a great movie. And afterwards, they had a panel to the marketing people to find out how they could sell it. And so I somehow got roped into being in that group of maybe 30 or 40 people because it was a preview. And I said, the only way you can sell it is it's just a terrific movie. You just go in and you sit down and you have a great time watching these really interesting characters do interesting things. It's completely compelling. You're never bored, and you're happy when you leave. But other than that, there's no hook. Without a hook today, there's no business. That's the way everything is. That's the way everything has been aimed. You have to have that marketing hook. And if you don't have it, they don't. And there's nothing particular in the good cop, bad cop that is a marketing hook. And on top of it, they don't really have a name that's familiar in America. Now, if they had Ryan Reynolds when he was starting out, they'd put it out, even if he's younger in it. But without that, no. And that's the problem. Because there's so much, you see, available now. And most people are only selecting on who's in it. A few will select based on the material, I grant you. More so if it's European or based on a book. But that then becomes the star, the book, say. But for the most part, no. It's you've got to have a name. Now they're doing better in Canada by bringing up names to try to make that work. And occasionally, if it's a one person like show primarily, then they've got a shot, because an independent picture can go a bit of the distance with one good name. But other than that, no.
That's unfortunate. But
all the films that were made from 77 to 85 in Canada without an American name did get distribution, and everything else. Those days are gone because that business is gone.
Wow. Well, I thought
of movies is for people up to 40 who like comic books and that kind of thing, and the odd movie for somebody over 40 who might go to a movie theater. But they haven't encouraged that. They've been so focused on getting a young audience that the other audience has kind of slipped away, so there's not a lot of theaters playing those interesting pictures, say foreign pictures, anymore.
Yeah, I think about the only thing playing right now up at the mall that adults would go to and enjoy, and I enjoyed this movie, was the book club.
Yeah, but that's very much a Hollywood movie with older stars in it. So when you've got older stars, you get an older audience. That's one they'll go and see. There's not a lot of those because that's too big a gamble that people will actually go out because it's so comfortable. Now, there was something I was looking. There's a 65-inch TV available down here for like $600. Well, if you've got that in your house, and given the problems with just traffic in general in the world because there's so many cars. And the fact that now movies in Beverly Hills are up to $18 each, plus popcorn and what have you, there's not a lot of reason to go out with the amount of stuff they're giving you on television, on streaming, or what have you. I mean, it's endless. You've got 5 major companies and other minor companies streaming, and so it's like everything else. They are driving people into their homes. And people will, remain here, and they will order everything. And I see around my neighborhood, the Amazon food trucks and things like that. More of the food stores, like Loblaws in Canada, is going to have to deliver to your home because people won't want to go out. In the winter, it's a great plus, I'll tell you that. Mm-hmm. But other than that, you're just homebound. And that seems to be the way, since kids, when they graduate school, can't afford to live anywhere but at home, this seems to be the way they're setting it up. It's very small-time thinking, and it's not going to work in the end. But the whole kind of economic system of North America, and not capitalism by any means, which does work very well, just the economic system they've put around capitalism and claim it's capitalism. It's not really. Has changed since the 80s, and basically since Brian Mulroney and Idiot Boy Reagan got together. And up to that point, it was a truly great country, and it worked for everybody. Now it's not. It doesn't, and it's not going to for a long time unless they can fix their mistakes, which I think they've left too long to really fix well. So I don't know what's going to happen.
Yes. I remember, I didn't get to see this, and I would love to see it, but there was a documentary made that I've been interested in that that I discovered online called Tax Shelter Terrors, and I think it featured prom night and whatnot from the Canadian tax shelter days, and
The problem with prom night was it made a lot of money.
Yep.
You see, the deal was that you could write off your film and do very well if it made just a little bit of money. But if it made a lot of money, there was no real plus to the deal, except you made a lot of money and you paid a lot of tax on it. So you had a big successful film. You didn't lose anything by any means. You actually made a lot of money, but you didn't get the tax write-off that everybody was expecting. Whereas if you made one that made a few bucks only or didn't make any money at all, it all worked. You got your tax write-off, and there was really no loss. It was a great system to start. And the best system they ever had was the low-budget movies. I think each year they did $1,200,000 movies. This is back in the 70s. And that was a great system. Now, they could up it today to maybe $500,000 and make, 20 or 25 of those. That was the best way, because every so often out of those comes an original, very inventive movie with one name.
Yep.
Christopher Plummer for 2 weeks in one of those movies is enough if it's really good and has a really good unique hook, which is rare but can happen. Gives you a movie, and at the loss of $500,000, there's enough places to play these things and enough money to kind of not lose much money in that system, and that was a great system to give people a shot. Now they've since then, because there wasn't any shot back then except the CBC. Now the colleges have all opened up and make kids make shorts, which is how I started. The CBC financed my short. It still had stars in it, luckily for me, but it was a short. Now you can get they make shorts themselves, and that was the other route. But they should be looking at giving these kids, a few bucks to make a movie, because it doesn't even cost. $100,000 today to make a movie would get you even more than the $100,000 I had back in 1973.
Yes, absolutely. What was it like when you went to do your first feature, embarking on that? Could you talk about your first stepping in to do that first feature? I forget what that film was now. I think it was...
I'll tell you, it was Hard Part Begins.
Okay, Hard Part Begins.
Strangely enough, which I'll tell you about in a second, the guy who set up a screening of Prom Night here on Friday night has a friend who emailed me because somehow he had seen a tape from Canadian TV of Prom Night, not a Prom Night, Hard Part Begins, my first film, and really loved it and wanted to know who had the ownership and things like that, because he deals with streaming services in the States, and he said, of course, there's not a lot of money in it, but I think it should be out there for people to see, so get in touch with me. Well, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, the fact that it's that old and the fact that it might just be available to people to screen. We don't know. I haven't talked to him. But it was the beginning of something different, and they had this low-budget program. And I had been working for the CBC fairly regularly, doing all sorts of things, including a great short, which had some. It had some for Canada at that time, some good names in it. It had the girl who was the queen of Quebec movies, because she had made a thriller, and she was as hot as they come. She was the Jennifer Lawrence of her time in '73. And she came down to Toronto to be the guest star in this little short for the CBC, because that's the way people did things. Back then, if she was around and not in France, you could get Alexandra Stewart, for instance, to be in a movie. But she came down and did it, and I had a great young kid, Don Scardino from the States, who just starred in a feature film, starred in several feature films in the States, independent films. And he was the star of it, and Bruno Gerussi, and a good cast of Canadian backup actors. So it was as pro as anything, and I had incredible luck, because you're supposed to shoot it in 5 days, but on the 5th day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it rained and it didn't stop, so that meant I got a 6th day. And then on top of that, I had a second unit day to do trains. So I had about 7 days for a 5-day show. So it came out great, and I used that, and the writer-director of the film, John Hunter, had worked in television, in different categories, as a producer, a writer, a PR guy, all sorts of things in Canada. And so when he wrote the script and we put it together, and I had a partner, Derek Lee, who showed how you could make it for $100,000 with side deals, where you could get Volkswagen to give you a free bus and things like that. And we went out and made it. It was for 24 days, and it turned out great. And it still had a great life to this day. and so it was. We went to Paris, Ontario, and that was the basis of the where we based, and we shot around that area. And the people were terrific. There was a lovely woman whose husband was a judge, and she teamed up with us because her son had a small part in the film, and he had a previous one I'd shot out. The little short I did was shot out way back when. And so she got us all the local help, and it was immense, and probably was $25,000 free. Like, for instance, the church women got together and fed us. The money that we paid was used went to the church, and they all came out and did it to help the church and as a hobby. And we had great food for not a lot of money. So it was a very well thought out way to make a movie. And we came in on budget and turned out a terrific film, which still stands up today. And the same thing to a degree. We had more money when we made Prom Night, and we needed a bigger crew because we had special effects and all sorts of things we didn't have in Hard Part Begins. And that it was just basically people and a music score. But the music score for Hard Part was good enough to get a pickup from A&M Records. But Prom Night, we had to stitch a crew together. But again, from beginning to end, even with this new crew, it was a terrific experience in both cases. And a few years ago, I was in doing Xena in Australia. No, New Zealand. And a guy comes up to me on, like, the first day I'm going out to meet the crew and what have you. And he says, hi, you gave me my first job. Mm-hmm. And I said, I've never been to New Zealand. How could I give you your first job? I think you're mixing me up. He said, no, it wasn't in New Zealand. It was in Toronto. He said, I was visiting people up there, and the guy I was visiting needed somebody to help him because he was working in film. And he took me out one day to work as an assistant on this film that you were making called Prom Night. And I was like carrying things and doing things like that. And I did it for a few days. And I thought, I can do this. And I became a grip. And now I'm the key grip for Xena. And I thought that, besides that being a big success, that was really nice for it to be that much of a success, where a lot of people came out of it. The assistant lighting guy, who was started as the assistant, became the official gaffer lighting guy on it. A couple of years later, invented a light that made him a zillionaire, and he lives in Bel Air now down here. So all of these people kind of started with me just wanting to make movies, and that's always the nice plus. The best one, though, which goes back and bridges both films, which is why I mention it, was that doing Hard Part, Derek Lee, who was ostensibly the producer of it and helped me put it together, and did sort of oversaw all the details getting it up and running, with John Hunter, who was kind of the creative producer, went out playing producer to a bar one night on Eglinton Avenue back in '73 and picked up two teenage girls and brought them back to meet the producer, because he was, meet the director, because he was the producer. He wanted to impress them or something. So I met them, and one was Susan, and one was this other girl, this other dark-haired girl, Anne-Marie. And Susan, I actually talked to, and I thought, gee, you're such a white trash natural girl, I'll give you a part. And so she did get a part in Hard Part. Anne-Marie, her friend, I think they were like 18, 19-year-olds. Anne-Marie, her friend, saw that somehow a girl could walk in and get cast in a movie and decided to go to acting school. Now, Anne-Marie's mother had been an actress, so she knew something about it. But she went off to acting school and met an actor called Art Hindle. Susan ended up coming to the States and looking for work. Okay, so now while she was working on the film, the contact that Susan had was the editor. Bill Gray is a wonderful editor and writer. And so when she came down, she kind of looked up Bill, and they would hang around. And then Eddie finally came down with Art Hindle. They got a place, and when I was doing, she started doing some work. So did Art. He did a lot of work, and she got a TV series, which is now kind of a cult series, a takeoff on James Bond. I can't think of the title of it. But it got a lot of hype and publicity, and she got a couple of movies out of it. Okay, so I'm when she's doing these things, I'm doing casting Prom Night, and I think she's the kind of girl who would be perfect for Wendy in this. So I said, come and do Wendy. So she said, like, I was never really a fan of hers because she was what she was in Wendy. She was, not to me seemingly a fun girl, but she was perfect for Wendy. So she did Wendy. Okay. So after that, she's done this series. She does a couple more movies, and then she calls my friend Bill one day and says, "Look, I've met this guy who's a writer, and I really like him, and I want to impress him." Her and Art had split up by this time, and I want to impress him. So since you read all these books, could you mention some books to me that I could talk to him about? So Bill says, yeah, sure. So he gives, because he is a reader of everything. I mean, the one that always got me was Gravity's Rainbow. I don't know if you've ever tried to read Gravity's Rainbow, but if you can read Gravity's Rainbow, good luck. So anyway, this is the kind of books he read, but he reads everything. So he gave her a list of 5 or 6 books, and I think had a coffee with her to tell her something about them, and she buys the books and packs up and ends up going with the writer to Hawaii. So my take on this, I don't think this is exactly how it happened, but this is being a movie writer, this is how I would like to have seen it happen, is her and the writer check into the hotel in Hawaii, and she puts her bag down, and off she goes to put her stuff into the bathroom, and he's left there in the living room, and he glances over her bag, and he sees these 5 books. Everything from a girl on a train kind of novel to Gravity's Rainbow. And while she's in the bathroom, he goes downstairs, and when she comes back, he's on his knees wanting to marry her because she's hot, she's beautiful, and she reads. That's my version. Mm-hmm. I don't think it quite happened that way, but she did end up marrying the writer.
Yep.
His name was Michael Crichton.
Mm-hmm.
You may recall that name from Jurassic Park.
I do, yep.
ER, etc. So they were married for 13 years. Along the way, she became a much nicer person. I ran into her about 7 years into the marriage in a bookstore, and she was quite pleasant, which was a shock. She never was, but she was then. And they had 2 kids. They divorced after 13 years of marriage. And she got a ranch in upstate New York, where I believe she still is and rides horses, and something in the area of $40 million. So for me, you put hard part with Prom Night for that girl, and she came out of it the best of everybody, but it was nice because I wanted to make a movie and found this guy who wanted to make a movie with me, the producer, and he found the 2 girls, and the rest is history. So that's my most successful person I've dealt with. I mean, next to Keanu Reeves, who I did his first film with, and he just worked his way through, because he's a wonderful actor, to Matrix. And I think 500 million or something, but it's not bad for Anne-Marie Martin, now known as Anne-Marie Martin / Eddie Benton, but I was kind of proud of that. So those were the 2 movies, and if you can, I believe that if you can, a lot of people, other like I said, the guy who created the light bulbs and everything else came out of that movie. But if you can be, you can have a success, and then other people have a success from it. That's the best world of them all. And that's nice to see. And that happened quite a few times for me by just accident, but it was kind of nice. But I tell the Anne-Marie story because she came out of it very well.
Why is she called Eddie Benson now? Like I clicked her.
There was an Anne-Marie. No, there was an Anne-Marie in the. That was her real name, Anne-Marie Martin. But there was one in the SAG Guild, so she had to get another name. So she picked Eddie Benton.
Oh, okay. Because I clicked on her. I clicked on her on Wikipedia, Eddie Benton, because it went to Anne-Marie Martin. It just kind of threw me off, Like, to me, she's Anne-Marie Martin, whether there's another one or not, But
no, but in SAG you can't. There was already an Anne-Marie Martin, so she had to pick another name because you can only have one of anything in SAG, or at least you could back then. And so she picked Eddie Benton, and that's what she worked as. And I think she met Michael Crichton on one of those mid-'80s films that he made in Toronto. And but apparently, I was told by some people, people who know more about my films than I do, who go to see them, thank goodness, that she had Jamie Lee got along so well with her that she had recommended her for a part in Halloween 2, which Eddie did.
I liked her in that movie. In fact, I think in many ways, Anne-Marie Martin was the most interesting one in the movie, most broad, in my opinion. Every time she's on screen, and it's not just...
Not only did she come out of it with a fair amount of money and a nice place to live, but according to a lot of very nice gay people who showed up for my screening, she is an icon in the gay community. because she plays the bad girl. They couldn't really explain more than that, but they liked it that she played the bad girl. So I think she's up there with Tallulah Bankhead, as somebody important to the gay community. So they liked her. So there you go.
Yes.
Not more than that, can you?
Absolutely.
And still be around. Let's put it that way. Apparently, she is.
Yeah.
So there's things like that happened all the way through. I mean, a lot of people that somehow came by me have gone on to bigger and better things, but nobody to 40 million that way, and by a fluke because Keanu had been in television and everything else up in Canada before I cast him in my film. So it's a little stretch to say I did anything except put him on my film, and then he started working a lot. But for Anne Marie, she was just at a bar. So there you go. So it's been a good run, and I've just slowed down recently. Only because there isn't a lot that I want to make, and I've been lucky enough to never have to actually, touch wood, work. I mean, I would do stuff, and they would give me money, and I've never wanted to make it a job. There's a lot of people in this business who come from other parts of it, like being editors or assistant directors, for who it's a job. It never was for me. I got to do exactly what I wanted to do, and when I sort of got bored with it, if you will, I would move on to something else. And at the moment, there isn't. I've been lucky enough to do a lot of genres and things like that, and there isn't a lot of stuff that inspires me to want to go out there as compared to years ago. I think the last inspirational film I saw was The Devil Wears Prada.
Great movie.
Terrific movie on every level. But past that, and maybe Nonstop, the Liam Neeson film. But there isn't a lot that has inspired me to say, I'd like to go do that. And I was a cartoonist originally for the Toronto Star, so I follow what happens in comics. But there's nothing in the way of comics that I think it was always, I thought I could at least contribute something. Now, it's a hard thing to say, because they are so well done. They are done by all these new movies, by a committee, and the technology is such that it's spectacular. I mean, they even took my timed print of Prom Night, of which they got a good one. There is a very good one. And they took it and they turned it into a Blu-ray that is so spectacular it stuns me. I mean, I thought the print I showed in 1980 was good. This was fabulous. So given that kind of technology, and given the technology if you're starting out with what they can do, it's very difficult to say I'd like to make this kind of a film because I can do something better. And then on a storytelling level, most of the stories that I would be interested in telling, they don't make anymore. It's a very uphill battle to get a film about something made. So you're basically in the comedy / comic book genres, and those don't really excite me too much. Well, and also the way they're done is they're done by several people. Like in the old days, given that there was a reasonable amount of action and what have you, you would have a second unit director and you would work with them and go out and shoot the action and all of that. But now, because there's so much of it, they split the units up. So basically, if you do the actors, you do the actors, and somebody does the stunts, and somebody does the technology and things like that. So it's a very divided film, and it's all put together by the production. They work. But it's not the same as going out every day and making your own film, whether you're making it in 200 days or 12 days. And a few people who have got a brand can keep going and make them that way their own films, like James Cameron, who simply signed on for 4 more, because he wants to make 4 more Avatars, because he had 4 more stories to tell, and that he can do, and he can do it perfectly his way. But there's not a lot of people doing that or have an Avatar story to tell. He came from that background. That's what he started as. Those were the films that interested him. They were never that interesting to me. I love the comics, but I never thought that there would be, like, in Terry and the Pirates, a movie per se, because they dealt in a different world. But for Cameron, that was the world he started in, and that's what he liked. And he started working for Roger Corman, doing those kind of things as an art director, and worked his way then into directing. But for the most part, no. If you're from that background, then it's fine. But zombies and things like that really don't do a lot for me. So.
No. Well, you know what? Last year, for the first time, I left New Brunswick and I went to Horrorama in Toronto, and I was invited by Lisa Langlois, who's been on my show twice, and she and I become pretty fast friends, and we talk pretty regularly. Loved her in Class of 1984. That was where I discovered her. And that's one of my favorite Canadian films.
Well, again, it was only by a fluke that I discovered that I gave her her first job. She kept saying that, and I thought, no, I gave her a job, but it was in a TV series in Canada, in like 70, maybe 5 or 6, and that was her first job. But I didn't realize I had done that, and so that was nice because she's a terrific person.
Yeah, I absolutely love Lisa, and she took me around to all the film locations from Class of 1984, including in front of Grand Central Tech. There's a picture of she and I in front of Grand Central Tech, the school where it was shot. And
right.
Yep, so that movie's kind of now pretty special to me, despite some hardships on the set to make it,
Well, my partner in Hard Part, who wrote Hard Part, rewrote that script. I always remember that when you mentioned it, I always remember him talking about it. He was the rewriter on it.
I understand it was a hard shoot because I guess the Canadian actors were not treated the best on that film shoot. And I don't want to point fingers at anybody, but there's one person in particular a lot of the cast and crew are not happy with. But anyway, Lisa took me around to locations, and it was just fantastic, And Lisa told me to come back, and she and I would connect again, and
great.
Yeah, so she and I became very good friends. She and I met up with Lynn Griffin from Black Christmas and her husband Sean Sullivan, who was in Wayne's World. And we met at a wonderful restaurant there, and I had Lynn and Sean on my show both a couple of times, and they were in Columbus, Ohio doing Horror Hound, but they wanted to know when I was leaving Toronto. So Lisa had contacted them, and so we hooked up with them, and I spent as much time with Lisa as I could, because I was honored to be her assistant at Horrorama. I could not turn that down. So it was my first trip, first time on a plane, and first time, and I always got homesick. But there, I didn't want to come home.
Well, it's taken me a long time to understand fans, because I started out as a fan of movies. I started going to the movies seriously when I was 10 in Liverpool and wanted to be part of them. And I remember buying a book of movie actors from 19, maybe whatever it was, 50, or it would be 50, I think 55, 56. We were over there, and my mother made me take it back because it was irrelevant and too expensive. But that's when I kind of became a fan of movies, but in a different way, because I wanted to make them. I was a fan who wanted to make them, and I was always assuming that that's what fans would be. They're not at all. There are often fans who are just fans of watching and holding close to their heart movies. And down here they have what I call minutia get-togethers, which was 70 people will get together, and they'll break them up into groups of 6 or 8, and they will have a movie of the evening, and then they will have to answer questions in order to win prizes about the movie. But the questions are never about like what I thought they would be when I went to one of them, about the making of the movie. They were about what happened in the movie, and for instance, in whatever this movie was, I'm trying to think of the name of it, about a bunch of kids in a small town. It was the precursor, in a way, to Stranger Things, and they were a Monster Squad. And these 2 kids had been kids in the movie, or teenagers, and now they were adults, and they were hosting it. And their questions to win awards were, what color sneakers was I wearing, from one of them, while going up the stairs to confront the bat-like creature. And I'm going, I don't know, and why would I? But that's what there's a whole world of now because of the internet, of people exchanging this information back and forth, and they are true fans, and they come out and watch the movies and see them and collect stuff. And it's a different thing, and I've realized that. They just enjoy the movies for what they are. They don't want to be part of the movies necessarily or anything like that. They just like kind of having them as a special thing.
Yeah, that was fun, and yeah, I'm going back to Horrorama again this year, and like I said, Lisa's open to connect with me again, and that'll be fun. And Dee Wallace is going to be there, and I interviewed her 3 years ago, so I'm looking forward to meeting her in person.
Well, I've never been to Comic-Con because I'm just not big into that many crowds. I mean, it's massive. So when I was a kid, one of the cartoonists who had helped me a great deal because I used to write to them and ask them for their help, and they would actually give it to me, was a man called Lee Holly, who had drawn Dennis the Menace for a while with Hank Ketchum, and then went out on his own with a kids panel strip. And I sent him my pathetic works, and he drew over them to show me how to do it, and it was the best thing anybody could have done because I did my little version of it, and he showed me how to do it. Then I matched his, etc. And over a year or two, I got to be a pretty good comic artist. So I hadn't talked to him in years because I did all of this when I was a teenager. And I saw that he was at a Comic-Con, a small one in San Jose. So I jumped on the plane and went up, met him. Lovely guy, and didn't really remember what he had done because people had done it for him and he'd done it for other people too. But I showed him the overdrawings and what have you, and had a nice chat to him and had a picture taken with him. And then I came back and he told me, and he didn't tell me, but he went off to use the washroom, and I was talking to the people around him, and they said that one of the things he had done was he had been one of the first 4 to 6 people, I think, who put together Comic-Con. And it had been so remarkably successful that he was now wealthier than in his dreams. So I thought that was great because that's anything good that happens to nice people, and he certainly took a lot of time out of his life to help me, is great. The sad thing was that he was so successful, he bought an airplane, and about a year ago, within the last year, sadly, a one-engine airplane to go fly around, and he was 85, it crashed and he died. And that was the saddest thing of all, because if he hadn't, if he'd stuck to cartooning and not been part of Comic-Con and not made that money, he wouldn't own the plane. But anyway, he was a terrific guy, and all through, whenever I've met anybody, from him to people like Sidney Furie or Dick Donner or any of them, they were always so helpful, and that's what I liked about the community of showbiz.
Well, one of the things I loved
is part of.
One of the things I loved about Horrorama is that it was smaller. I had about 12 guests, and I was able to casually talk to any of them without interfering with any of the other fans. And I loved the down-to-earth, very casual atmosphere that Horrorama had. Chris Alexander, of course, put that on. And, I'd already at that time had Lisa Langlois and Leslie Donaldson both on twice. So that was going to be interesting, just connecting with those two. And, of course, I made several interviews from people I met through that. I mean, Carl Zetier, of course, worked on Prom Night, and I met him and got my picture taken with him at Horrorama, and he did my show back in January. And
when he was on, what did he talk about?
We talked mainly about Black Christmas,
and the scoring of it.
Yep. It's funny because when I went to Toronto, I brought a lot of Blu-rays with me to get signed, and it slipped my mind that he was part of Prom Night, and I didn't bring the Blu-ray with me. I brought Black Christmas, and he and Lynn Griffin both signed that. But anyway, we talked about Prom Night when I interviewed him back in January. Very, very nice man.
Well, they did again. Talk about odd. When we left Liverpool to go to Toronto in '54, my family, well, one of the very first places we lived was on Sunnyside by High Park, and literally just right in front of me was a high school, and behind the high school was a movie theater, which is still there. It's one of the last art house theaters in Toronto, on Roncesvalles. And so I used to go there and watch movies as a 9, 10-year-old. And years later, they screened Prom Night, and they had Carl and Mary Beth Rubins there to talk about it. The very theater where I had sat watching movies thinking, hey, I wonder how they do this. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, Mary Beth Rubins, I would love to eventually get in touch with her to have her on, because I understand she was at one of the Horror-ramas a few years ago, so...
Well, she came out for this screening of Prom Night. I know that because that's on the internet. And then she had something physical happen to her, because now she's part of a theater group with people with disabilities. I don't know what it was, but she's back and working, because she's working. If you go to the internet, you'll see her working with these people at this theater group for people with disabilities. But she came out for that one. And she doesn't have any credits for a long time, and I think that's because she had something happen to her. I don't know what it was. They don't specify in what I could see on the internet. But it was very nice that they did it in the movie theater that I used to sit in and watch movies as a kid,
Yeah, I remember her pigtails in Prom Night.
Very good, yeah.
Yeah.
So I told you they had a screening at the New Art down here, which is one of the last major independent cinemas. I would say the Review on Roncesvalles is probably the closest in Canada that is an independent theater. I can't think of another one that's just independent. So they had it down here, and they do very well at the New Art with all sorts of movies, and they do special once a month get-togethers at night for midnight shows of movies, like what's the one where they all get dressed up and sing and dance? One of the first big hits of that. It's actually gone into huge profit because of it. The Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh, yes.
Things like that. So the guy in charge of the theater decided to do one for prom, since we're in prom season, sort of, to do one for prom night and dress the theater up as like a school and have prom decorations and a photo booth and all sorts of stuff. It was a great thing. And they're about a 300-seat theater, and they filled it to 200 people out of 300 for a screening of Prom Night from basically 39 years ago. And it was quite wonderful. And the people came by, and they were fans of the movie. And either when it came out or when they saw it on VHS, which is where most people, strangely enough, saw it. And they brought their copies of everything, VHS, DVDs with different titles. I mean, it was just amazing what they had collected, and I signed them. And it was a very nice evening for a film that has kept its value through time, and still there's enough of people, niche people in L.A. that 200 of them will come out and show up for an evening and watch it.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Before I did this interview this morning when I got home from work, because I work nights, I watched Prom Night on my Blu-ray of Prom Night, and I listened to the commentary track for the first time and enjoyed it immensely, but you guys made a mistake in the commentary track.
I'm sure that's quite possible because there are things about the film that more people know than I do, which was pointed out the other night when they could identify people in the film whose names I did not know. So there you go. What was the mistake?
Well, you guys were saying, I don't think it was even you, but I think it might have been the guy with you, but said that remember when the girl falls out the window? There was the
young girl falls out the window.
Yep, yes. And he was saying that Jamie Lee Curtis's younger self was responsible for that, and I said no, and he kept saying that. But when they show up, they got the kids in the building.
Oh, that was. I don't know how that happened because it was Wendy's younger self who was responsible. It was Jamie Lee's sister who went out the window.
Yeah, because there's the three kids that show up. Jamie Lee goes off home, and then the brother and sister twins stand there for a minute. The brother goes, but the younger sister goes in. Goes
inside and is made fun of, yes.
So the Jamie Lee character, the younger version of her, she left. She was, and this guy kept saying that she was responsible for it right up until the end of the movie.
I think he was just getting mixed up. I think whoever it was I don't even remember it, but
yeah,
was getting mixed up with Wendy. That was all.
Yeah, obviously, because I was like, wow, I was glad I listened to that before I did this interview, because I was like, man, that was that was an oversight, a big oversight, because it wouldn't have made sense for the Jamie Lee Curtis character throughout the rest of the movie if she hadn't been responsible for her sister's death.
No, and I talked to a few people at the movie theater who had come along with people who knew about it but hadn't seen it. And there weren't many, but there were a couple that I talked to because one brought a friend over, and they thought one thought it was the mother who had done it. One thought it was the mother, and one thought since he disappeared halfway through, I'm assuming he went home, the principal maybe. So as a psycho kind of mystery thriller, which is what it was meant to be, it kind of works. So that was nice to see.
Yeah,
Good cast. We were very lucky with the cast we got.
Yeah, even the young cast there at the beginning, they did a really good job, and with kid actors, it's a hit and miss.
They did a great job.
Yeah,
they did a great job across the board.
Yes, but yeah, no, I spotted that, but I gotta say I enjoyed watching the movie this morning. Of course, here's something I didn't know. I can't believe I didn't know this, but it wasn't until you guys pointed it out. The red herring, the janitor. I was like, I did not recognize that was the same guy that Cronenberg had used in like Scanners and Existenz and so many movies.
Well, what had happened, he was a terrific actor, a nice guy. And he'd been in a serious accident because he was crossing Avenue Road in Toronto and a truck hit him. So he was left in pieces for the longest time. This was kind of his chance to come back. And since he didn't require a lot of lines, because, once you've been hit by a truck, it kind of affects your mind, he didn't require a lot of lines. I thought he would be terrific for it as basically as a silent character in it because he was such a good actor. And he was, and he did a great job. And there's other scenes that we shot that aren't in the film because they weren't needed. But he did a very good job as the red herring where he just had to say a few words, and he could do that with no problem. And it was nice because after that he started working again. And it was very difficult for him because the accident had really, affected him.
Well, he was even really good in Scanners, which came out the year after, So, I mean, I'm glad he took a step back and did movies again.
He did, I think, Scanners just before Prom Night.
Oh, did he? Because he had a lot more lines in Scanners.
Yes, I think he did it before the accident. I think he did it. That's right. And then Prom Night, yes. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, what? He had done that because they were lining up Scanners to come out when I just started Prom Night, yes.
Yeah, but Scanners was released after Prom Night, though. It came out the year after.
Yes, but it was made before Prom Night.
Okay, all right.
Not that much before. I mean, they were doing the ads for it in like if I shot Prom, I think in August, they were doing the ads in July for Scanners, so it had been shot the beginning of the year, and then he had his accident.
Yeah.
Before that, actually, he just had his accident after the Scanners film.
Okay. Yeah, it's unfortunate because you don't see a whole lot of Cronenberg movies anymore, and it's because a fantastic director, but it's like a lot of his stuff now is not getting a good release.
Well, no, and it's like De Palma too, who just retired from it, because the kind of movies that they made now are miniseries. They're not movies because they're not like comic book movies. They're unique. There's a couple of guys left who can still do it. The guy who won the Academy Award this year for The Shape of Water.
Okay.
One of those kind of guys. And Tim Burton are the other two guys. And up with Cronenberg. But there isn't, outside of that, I'm sure that Cronenberg writes a lot of scripts that aren't made. For his kind of stuff, but it's very hard to get that stuff made if it isn't connected to a book or a comic book, and that's the problem. And Tim Burton is doing a live action Jumbo now.
Okay.
Those guys are interested in doing that, but that's the problem. Basically, you do the comic books, or you don't do that, and there's not a lot to be done in the comic books, as I said, because it's all split up between so many different divisions that if you're used to doing a film by yourself, whatever it is, and living and dying by making it work, well, that's not comic book land for you. So I think that could be a problem. So we don't see a lot of work from these inventive guys because they thought they would try, since a couple of superhero movies had some comic touches in it, to have two guys who do comedies bring that to a Star Wars movie. Well, no, it wasn't going to work on Star Wars, so after they'd started, they got rid of them. Then went to Ron Howard and got him to make Solo, and it came out, and it was one of those where it just, for whatever reason, it just didn't take off. But you can't bring in comedy people if you're not doing the Zucker brothers, so to speak. And they weren't doing that. They wanted a lighter touch maybe, but whatever it was confused, because there's a certain thing about comic books. And remember that the comic books that they did those comedy ones from were apparently the books themselves, were sort of tongue-in-cheek books. Star Wars was never that.
Yeah, absolutely. What was I going to say here? I lost my train of thought.
But primarily outside of special effects and big action sequences, there isn't much difference between the Star Trek movies and the Star Trek series, except that the series was much more honed in, as Gene Roddenberry created it, on people and their characters. It was like it was much more of the era of which he came of age in, like Naked City, when Naked City was cops in New York investigating people stories. Well, these were the people on the Starship Enterprise getting involved with a different kind of people, be they creatures or visitors from another planet or anything. They were still those kind of human stories around different kinds of people. Well, when they went to the movies, they simply expanded them to have a lot of action and violence. So, and that's applicable to most of those kind of films. They apparently were trying to do, I think, a fifth or a sixth Transformers, but apparently they can't get a script, because the first Transformers was a terrifically entertaining movie. I just didn't think there was anything more to it than that. Apparently there isn't. You can't go past 4 or 5. But the reason they want to and are desperate to try to keep it alive is the rides. Mm-hmm. And all the toys and everything. If a movie hasn't been around for a few years, then you're not going to jump on the Transformer ride. It's going to be replaced by something else. The Avatar ride, or I don't know what. So you've got to keep the movies up to keep the rides going, and that's where it's all falling apart for me. I mean, I knew it was falling apart when they sold VHSs in the supermarket, because the thing about movies was they were unique. If you didn't see them when they came out, you may not see them again for at least 4 or 5 months, and then they would be in a rerun theater, and you'd have to truck out to, as I did once, up to Don Mills up by Bellevue to see a movie. Well, that was what made them special and unique. Once you could buy it and put it at home, that was the beginning of the end. And now when you're streaming them, they're just product. They're like, there's Hunt's ketchup and there's Heinz ketchup. Pick a ketchup, buy one. Well, that's what the movie business has become. No more, no less.
Yeah, I know what I was going to say. I didn't know. Brian De Palma retired?
Well, semi-retired. I mean, he hasn't made a film in a long time.
I've always been a fan of his work, too, because I know I'm right now in talks of hopefully, I just interviewed somebody who might be able to put me in touch with Angie Dickinson, because I really want to talk to somebody about Dressed to Kill, which I think is such an underrated, I think it came out in 1980, same year as Prom. And a lot of people cite The Shining, but I say Dressed to Kill is as good as The Shining. I think.
Yes, it is. But again, a lot of these pictures, they were opening the doors to explore things in a way. Like I think Michael Caine was a cross-dresser or something in that movie.
Yeah.
Well, now that's all been like opened, and nobody cares one way or the other. In that, it was nudge, nudge, wink, wink stuff. That isn't the way it is anymore. So there's a limit to what you can do, and he explored it in many ways, with twins, with all sorts of things, and made some fine films. But then his last one, I believe, was Blue Dahlia, about the killing of a woman in California, which was quite good. But again, it wasn't the hooks he had in the past, and And since he had done some very, very successful big pictures, a couple of space pictures for Disney, etc., I think he hasn't done much. So I heard he was living in France. That's all I heard.
I loved the horror films he did, like Dress to Kill, Sisters, Phantom of the Paradise, Body Double. Even Femme Fatale, I like those kind. I wasn't a big fan of Mission Impossible or Mission to Mars. I liked it when he did the thrillers,
No, I know, but like anybody else, there's nothing really in those big movies except money. I mean, there's no real satisfaction in those big movies. There's just, they pay you a lot of money, but it's hard to have satisfaction when there's so many other entities part of the film. You know, I mean, special effects and stunts usually win awards for those films. The directors don't. So I think that's what it was. And since there was no reason for him to go and have to worry about paying the bills or anything, I just think he tried to do things, and probably still is, that are very hard. Now, I think he's got one he's doing in France at the moment, but they're very hard to put together. The other guy who disappeared, interestingly enough, he used to collect houses, they said, but he had a lot of successes and was a very interesting director, was Adrian Lyne, and he hasn't done anything for 10 years.
Oh, yes. I just watched 9.5 Weeks on Blu-ray the other day, speaking of him.
Yes, it is a masterpiece of Academy Award-winning proportions compared to the new versions of it. Shades of gray and shades of black. I mean, they were so horrendous. It's looked like they never bothered to see his film. His film was looking back. It's a terrific movie. I mean, it's great fun, and these were just awful movies. And he had a great cast in those two, and Kim Basinger and Mickey Rourke. I mean, that was a great cast for those movies.
And you know something else? The soundtrack has a lot of Canadian artists on it.
Sure. I mean, it was,
you had Corey Hart, you had Luba and Del Bello, and I love that Corey Hart song, "Your Asian Eyes," which is in that film. And yes, I love that. I discovered that song through 9.5 Weeks, and I actually ordered the soundtrack because of that song. But it's a great soundtrack, and the visually stunning in terms of its locations. Yeah, 50 Shades does not hold a candle to it.
No, and that's the modern version. They made 3 of them, and it's the modern version.
I saw the first 2. I wasn't going to stop. The first one I was okay with what they were doing. I didn't think it was great cinema or anything. But the second one I hated, and the third one I didn't even bother with. I was like, this is not 9.5 Weeks. 9.5 Weeks at least explored the themes,
None of them had Kim Basinger and Mickey Rourke.
Nope. Oh no, they did not.
You're settling for less. Now, for as I keep having to remind myself, if you're now you really, once you turn 50, can't have any comment on anything but the technical aspect of a film, because the audience changes, and what would appeal to an audience now, let's say under 30, the way I was when I started making pictures, is completely different than would have appealed to me back then. For me, it would have been 5 Easy Pieces. Today, it's probably a comic book movie. So it's a different world that they're in, and so you have to accept that. You have to say, okay, things have changed, and I'm all for change. I'm a big, because that's why we're all here, and that's what progress is. But you've got to either make it the same with a slight change or change it for the better. A lot of things have not been changed for the better, and I'm not saying just personally. I'm just saying if you look at life, they haven't been changed for the better. So that's my only downside. But you've got to say these work, whatever it may be, for the audience. Like one of the hottest guys on Netflix, I think, is Adam Sandler. I've never connected to Adam Sandler, and I probably never will, but that's because I connected to a whole different group of comedians when I was growing up.
If you want to see a good Adam Sandler movie, one that impressed me is Punch Drunk Love, which Paul Thomas Anderson made.
Well, you see, I thought the movie really worked great. It's one of Paul Thomas Anderson's better movies.
Yep.
I just thought that he killed it. I thought if they'd had an actor in there instead of him, it would have been a great movie because it had all the setup for that. But you can't put the camera on Adam's face and have it reflect anything. And that's what that movie needed. But so did Stanley Kubrick's last movie. He went for the star power of 2 stars, and lost his movie because when he was Harvey Keitel had been on the movie originally, and for whatever reason it wasn't working out, and so he also wanted to go home because Stanley would put him in a hotel for months. So he made a deal and he left, and Stanley brought in somewhat, since Harvey wanted to leave anyway, in desperation, Sidney Pollack, who had worked with Tom Cruise so well in The Firm. And The Firm was a great movie and still is. And he said to him when he arrived, I know you're a great actor and you'll do this part great that Harvey was doing. But he said, I'm hoping that maybe since you're playing across with Tom, you can help, bring something, to it, because it's a very tricky character, and I'd appreciate, the help you get working with him, which is true. If you put two actors together, one can, particularly like Pollack, can help the other a great deal.
Jennifer Jason Leigh was supposed to be in that movie too, and she had all her scenes shot in Eyes Wide Shut, and then she had scheduling conflicts for the reshoots because she did Existenz for Cronenberg, and I felt bad because I loved Jennifer Jason Leigh, so.
And that was a perfect movie for her, but so they go ahead and he's sitting over lunch explaining this, and Sidney Pollack tells Stanley words he doesn't want to hear. He says, in your movie, Stanley, most of Tom's stuff is on his face in close-up. It's not him running around. In The Firm, he's always moving. And when Tom is moving, he's a great actor.
Oh.
And that's the problem with the movie, because there's nothing on his face. I mean, no matter what because it's important that he think that's part of it, and there's nothing there. If he had Sean Penn, the whole of the ball game, he would have had a great, riveting movie. I always say Sean Penn and Julianne Moore would have made that a terrific movie, because the movie itself is very interesting and very quite good and beautiful to look at and all of those things. It just has a hole in it because the two leads can't deliver, because it was so complex. And he thought that they could, and then when they couldn't, he realized it. And he tried with Pollack, but as Pollack said, if he's not moving, there's nothing anybody can do. And it was unfair of Stanley to do 200 takes on, or whatever, 100 takes on Tom Cruise, because Tom Cruise is not capable of that. Tom Cruise, as in Mission Impossible, is a sensational movie star, but there's no depth there. There's nothing he's ever done with depth. There's never going to be. But that was the problem. And that movie was all about the depths of the character.
Mm-hmm. And
so that was a sad effect. But that will often happen with movie stars, because, like Brad Pitt is a terrific movie star, not a lot of depth.
Yeah, he did that multi-take, and it just drove poor Shelley Duvall just mad in The Shining, and she gave a great performance, but there comes a point when...
Well, no, what he was doing, he had Jack Nicholson, so he had somebody who could deliver, brilliant actor. But what he had gotten used to was with Peter Sellers was doing that. So he would say to Peter Sellers, let's try something else, and Peter Sellers would come up with 1,000 different versions to say hello. Well, let's try something else, and he'd give you the comic version, the horror version, the this version, the that version. Well, most actors can't do that. It was just that was Peter Sellers' uniqueness. They can't do that. Well, when he got to Jack Nicholson, he realized, certainly he got some of the literal English actors to do it in the one with Ryan O'Neal. And then when he got to Jack Nicholson, he had, in a way, Peter Sellers back again. So he could do that. He could try all sorts of things, how far you can push the envelope and what have you. Because Nicholson was capable of that and willing to take a chance. And that's why that's what sustains the movie, is his performance, because it's so good. Around him, he got the best actors he could, but he wanted them to be like Jack, and that's not what most actors are. The few people who are like that are unique. Like one of the, which they keep playing on TV here, Nancy Meyer's best movies, probably the best movie she ever made, is Something's Got to Give, with Nicholson and Diane
Keaton.
Yep. And Keanu Reeves. But the reason it's so gripping is the heart of it. The what holds it together is Nicholson and Keaton, and they had lived together and had a long relationship before they ever did that movie. So when they came to it, they brought all of that, which could just come out on the screen with every word they said. So what was backing up that was their relationship when he said hello. You see, and that's what most people don't realize. It's the like I did a film with Aja Regenta, who came back in the news recently, and Dennis Hopper. Now, Aja wanted to do this film because she was such a fan of Dennis Hopper, and Dennis Hopper wanted to do it because he owed $1.5 million to Rip Torn for lying about him and insulting him on the TV show, the Tonight Show. So he had to go out and do a lot of movies to make $1.5 million to give to Torn with management fees and things like that. So he took anything. So it might have been like before he came and did mine, he did Black Leather Bloodlust or something, anything to pay the bills. So when his mind was not the greatest, he had a hard time remembering things because of his lifestyle. But he would take Aja, we would block it of a morning, and he would take Aja into the trailer and rehearse it over and over again. And in the course of doing that, I was convinced that as they were rehearsing the lines so he could basically remember them, he would give her direction. And I'm sure he did, because together they were sensational. They just were riveting in this little movie I did, and that was them, because he needed to learn the lines, and she wanted to work with him, and so they were both great, and that's why when you've got two people who are like that, who are really good, and you can put them together, the movie works. If they're not, it falls apart, and we don't have that level for the most part of actors, so they try to make it up with the scripts and the stories. Well, if we had great writers doing this stuff, I would agree with you, but there's not many, and that's the problem, because then you can, for the most part, you can rely on the actor. Keanu Reeves does action pictures now, about a guy whose dog is lost or something, or taken or killed, Wick. Wick.
John Wick.
And he's sensational in it. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that he's massacring hundreds. It's just you watch him. He knows, he's got charisma, and he knows how to do this, and you can't turn away. And so the last John Wick, I just watched all the way through because he was so wonderful in it. He was so great, and he's mastered doing all of those matrices, how you do this kind of action stuff. And he does it very well. I mean, he does it so realistically up to the point where if it's really complicated, the stunt guys take over, but he can do it right up to that point. So he's very good, but he is the heart of the movie. You need that kind of acting. And boy, we're in short supply. I think Nicholson is retired or semi-retired. You don't see him much anymore.
No.
You don't see that level of acting, and I'm trying to find it in new actors. Jennifer Lawrence has it. There's no question about it.
I like Emma Stone.
The run-ups behind her are two. I was going to say Emma Stone and Chloe St. Moritz.
Oh, I love her too. Yep.
No, that's about it. They've as they say, as they said to Catherine Hepburn reported. They said to her, "You've got it." She said, "I know I've got it. I don't know what it is, but I have it."
Yeah.
They've got it. There's no way of explaining it, and there's no way they can explain it. You just have to say action, and they do what they do. And there was a girl down here. She'd been a VJ and became an actress, and didn't really have, I don't know, much of an interest in anything. But she had it. You could put her in front of a camera, and she would talk on her cell phone all the way up to you saying action. She would put it down, do the scene, seemingly unconsciously, be brilliant, and then as soon as I said cut, she'd pick up her cell phone and be back to being whoever she was. And it was miraculous what she could do without any thought. It's a magic. It's Paul Bradley had it. Paul Bradley, the Canadian, wonderful, brilliant Canadian actor. I hate to say brilliant, but he was, because he was an alcoholic, and he was cleaning up a place in Toronto, and they said, "Would you step in and do some, a read for us, because our actor's gone," and he did, and he became a member of the class, because he had nothing else to do except drink. And after a few months, Don Shabib saw him and said, "Wow, are you great?" And so they put him in a movie, and they said action, and he just came to life. He was just incredible. And he did that. Unfortunately, he couldn't give up drinking, and he died too young. But he was wonderful. He was just, there was no way of explaining him. We just put him in front of the camera, say action, and he's fabulous. It's sad because there are a few people like him. There's an awful lot of very nice, very competent, good actors working, but they're not nearly up to that level. And that's the saddest thing of all, because once they have that level, mostly they are what would I say? Not normal. These are not normal people. It's the nicest way to say it. But God, in front of a camera, they're brilliant. We need more of them. It's hard to find.
I'll tell you, though, going back to Prom Night, of course, Jamie Lee Curtis, of course, was a staple for horror films at the time. Halloween, I thought, was...
She was the Jennifer Lawrence of her time, no question about it. She came out one day, Leslie, who's a real pro and a wonderful actor, came out of her classroom because he'd been running lines with her. I bumped into him, and he said, God, is she brilliant. She's keeping all the meaning of the lines the way you want them and changing them also. It all reads so much better. Boy, is she great. And she was.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting is that they got an update of a 2018 Halloween coming out, and they've had so many bad sequels to that because the first one was a masterpiece in my opinion, but they got John Carpenter back working on this. They got Jamie Lee Curtis back, and they even got Nick Castle playing Michael Myers in it as well. And the trailer for it looks good. I'm hoping they do it justice, because I think.
Well, first of all, they're not going to be able to, because you have to remember when Halloween came out, it was party to about 6, maybe 5 movies from 1970 to Halloween coming out that were unique, because nothing like that had happened before. Whether it was The Hills Have Eyes or The Last House on the Left, or the Buggy Creek Monster. There were about 6 or 7. Then came Halloween, and it was a true shock. It meant nothing to America, even though it made millions of dollars, because it was a B movie. It's only after that they started to see the potential in this, and the studio started to do it. But as the people who came to see Prom Night were amazed that I said how Jamie's manager had to beg to get an audition with us for her to do the part. And so he called me up. He got to me, and I said, of course. And I persuaded Peter Simpson, who wanted with me a girl who had done
the Brady Bunch.
The Brady Bunch. And before he was convinced, he had to put her through an audition of dancing. But she still wanted it, because you would have thought by then she would have been a star, but she wasn't, because the business didn't get it. They thought it was just an independent like Crown International would put out. No, it was far superior to that, and that was the impact. Whatever you do since that movie, I would say conservatively there have been 1,000 of these films, so you've got to override 1,000 for people to say, wow, now the way he's doing it, the way they're doing it with Jamie Lee and everything is a huge plus, because it will do well and people will go and see it. But to actually shake it up, very hard to do when you think how many movies have been done since.
Yeah.
Like most of Night Shyamalan's stuff is Twilight Zones. They work. There was that one, Get Back, which is a terrific movie.
Yeah, Get Out.
Basically 1 hour of a setup for a Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
So this is the problem. Now, of course, I'm using Twilight as an example, but most people have not seen this. They have not seen nearly as much as me, probably as you. But so they're going ooh ah. But for us, it's only difficult because we've seen so much. We've been exposed to so many movies. Like a few people, real fans, have seen the original Last House on the Left. They did a remake which made no sense whatsoever. But the original was a no-budget, a true, horrifying, non-stop movie.
Absolutely,
from a great guy.
Yeah,
from a brilliant guy.
Yep.
And then he did the Hills Have Eyes, which only stays in my memory because I saw it at a theater in the hotel in Toronto downtown at like a 6:00 show. And when they went to the creatures from the hills went to take the baby to eat it, the women in the audience left.
Oh, wow.
I always remember that. I thought, that's about as big a compliment as you can give a movie when all the women can't take it anymore and they have to leave.
Yep.
But no, sadly he's gone. And the whole that kind of thing has been replaced by a new view of kind of horror, which is much more like, strangely enough, going back to the 60s, to Jack Clayton when he did The Innocents. It's gone back to that kind of mysterioso, slow build stuff, which is in a nice way. It's just I've seen so much of it, that's all. They're remaking that as a mini-series, The Innocents. It's been made like 10 times as movies, or TV movies or what have you, but they're doing it now as a mini-series.
Yes. Of course, I love listening to this commentary, and I know you mentioned this before. you mentioned the issue with Terror Train, and somebody cast Jamie Lee Curtis when you would you'd want that to happen.
I just said, look, you can see my whole cast and take any you want. Please don't take Jamie, and the guy did. But again, it wasn't very successful, not because it wasn't a decent film. It was in its own way interesting. It didn't have the characters that Prom Night or Halloween had, but it was okay. But nobody goes on a train. Kids don't go on a train.
No.
You know, if horror's on a train, so what? We're in their own suburb or in a high school. You're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to explain that guy, because even to the producer who wanted me to do it, I said, look, you know, good luck with it, but it's just a title because there's no connection there. They didn't get it. Well, they're all on a train. Very exciting. I said, I'm sure it will, but no, it's just not common ground, and you need common ground. That's all.
Yeah. No, she done Halloween 1 and 2, The Fog, and Prom Night, Terror Train, and Road Games, and then she branched out, Trading Places, A Fish Called Wanda, True Lies. Like Jamie Lee, I don't understand why she's never been nominated for an Oscar. I think that she certainly has that potential, but I'm looking forward to seeing the new Halloween, just to see what Carpenter brings, and seeing Jamie Lee again.
The last terrific movie I remember she did was the one where she changed places with Lindsay Lohan, and it was a terrific movie for Disney. She played Mom, remember?
Yeah, Freaky Friday. They played well off each other, yes.
Terrific movie in every way. But once you turn 40 in Hollywood, there's, 40, 45, there's less parts. They're just not going to jump up and down and give you a lot of parts. And so now I'm really interested to see what she does in Halloween, because that was the start of sort of her mum phase. But she's a wonderful actress and did a lot of stuff, and on top of that is married to a great guy. He's one of the guys, Christopher.
Guest?
Guest. He does those takeoff movies.
Yeah, he did. This is Spinal Tap.
Yeah, and several other ones. But no, she was. It was a very lucky, great cast across the board, and much of the stuff that I've done, I've been lucky to get really good cast, no matter what it was. I did a little one. The one I told you about, it wasn't a big budget by any means. The one with Aja Argento and Dennis Hopper, and it apparently plays up there. People have seen it, so it plays somewhere on the various channels up there. And it was a terrific movie. It turned out very well. It was great to do, and Aja and Dennis were sensational together.
She, of course, the daughter of Dario Argento, of course, has done a lot of great Italian horror. I don't know if I'm interested much to see the remake of Suspiria, because I'm a big fan of the original, but I don't know. But they get Jessica Harper in it, and I love her.
It's a different audience, that's all. They're making it for a different audience. If they can do something that entertains them, fine. It's a different audience, the people between 18 and 35 today. And I've never been able to go into binge watching, because even if it binge watches like my favorite shows, whatever they may be, like Route 66 or what have you, I still don't want to see more than 2 of them. But these people will watch, 10 episodes of something.
Yeah.
That's very hard on me. I don't quite understand that, because one of the appeals was every week you wait for it. And even if they gave me a choice between binge watching and watching it every week, I'd watch it every week, but they don't. They binge watch. And often they will binge watch all sorts of strange shows down here. Car 54, Where Are You? On one of the old channels, will binge watch for 24 hours. Now, they're very funny, entertaining shows, but you can't keep watching them.
No.
But people do. So there you go. It's a different world. It's changed. And I'm not so sure that there was any better way for it to change, quite honestly, because they've made so much. We've churned out years ago. I don't know if I told you this great story, but years ago in the 40s, when they were putting TV on the air, they were auditioning writers, book writers, theater writers, radio writers, etc., to come in and write for it. And a theater guy came in, and he said, it doesn't really interest me, but I can see that it's kind of like theater with multiple cameras, but on a proscenium stage, basically. And he said, I guess I'll give it a try, but tell me, where is it written man deserves so much entertainment?
Yeah.
This was for 3 networks in 1948. God knows what he would say today. I mean, we are inundated. If you take cable and streaming and DVDs and movies and video games and stuff, little shorts on your iPhone and sports and concerts and music. I mean, there is not a second free in your life to even think, given the amount of entertainment that's available. Now, what it does is it dilutes great entertainment because you need so much of it. Back when in the 50s and 60s, when there was a limit on it, you got greater stuff because it wasn't that competitive. If you were going to release 4 or 5 pictures over the weekend and they were all kind of, let's say, kitchen sink dramas, then one would survive the rest and some would do better than others, but they would all be with that as a backdrop. Now you can't do that because they're going to release, X-Men 12 or what have you, and that's going to get the audience. So it's changed, and that's the greatest way it's changed because I always claim that we were the second luckiest generation because when we grew up, all television, particularly television, had morality in it. The good guys won, the bad guys lost, yes, but there was a great deal of morality and a great deal of why people will like that. I saw an old Route 66 with Rod Steiger where he's playing a criminal, and he's a sociopath, and he can't understand why he's never felt anything, ever, and he's trying to find out, and that was what the 1 hour was about. And it was truly gripping. You don't see that. They don't delve into that. The closest you come with a decent mystery is, about things today torn from the headlines, is Law and Order Special Victims. But other than that, the rest is all sort of made-up fantasy of one version or another, whether it's horror or sci-fi or whatever. And there's not a lot to be gained out of that to develop a way of looking at life, where there was up until, I would say, about 1975, and then it kind of disappeared. Police Story would give you that, but then it came into the year of Charlie's Angels, and then it became straight entertainment, and that's what it is now. Nobody seems to try very, very, very much to try to enlighten. Occasionally, they do. Like the O.J. trial was a very enlightening piece. This one, Pose, is very enlightening, but for the most part, no. They just want to entertain you, and that's it. And so there's not a lot of depth. And I guess it's just growing up with that depth that I miss it. Now, it came from radio originally. I'm sure people in radio were saying the same things. You don't have to illustrate what we do, but it came from radio. And yet, before radio, we were right back to what we are now, which was entertainment, which was vaudeville and silent movies, which were there just to entertain.
Yes.
So what goes around comes around, and there will be another explosion, I hope, of some morality-based of television, because we kind of need it. I read the other day that I believe one should ask questions about his company and that he isn't running a con, Elon Musk, but in order to raise money, even though he's raised billions for his company, he created flamethrowers that you can buy for $500 a piece. And over the weekend before last, he sold 2,000 of them. Now, I don't think there's any restrictions on who can own a flamethrower. Well,
yeah.
In an era where kids are going into schools and blowing people away, why would you want to give them the possibility of a flamethrower, or anyone? I mean, suppose you get pissed off someday with somebody, and they come over to your house, and you don't like them, you can put the flamethrower.
I don't understand, too, because the States is becoming just a nightmare right now,
Well, no, not really. The press want to present it that way. It's really, quite honestly, not much different than Bush, and not much different than Reagan. And it's sad that the people who vote for these people are the people who always do the worst when they're in office. But it hasn't, because the Constitution and the way it was originally set up, which is quite unique and almost inconceivable that these people back then could have done such a great job. The country is protected from anything going too awry. And the people who will lose most are like all the people in the Midwest who go to vote for somebody like Trump, and then find that he's going to slap tariffs so they can't sell their foods overseas, and the farms will suffer. It's always those people living in California. We suffer very little with anybody basically since the last kind of real president was Eisenhower. He wasn't a great president, but he was a real president. He ran it as a business and balancing both. It was a balance in government and all of that. He was like Lester Pearson and Diefenbaker in Canada. They ran it as a business. Well, he was the last guy really. LBJ was pretty good, but not in. He was going to change things big time. What's his name? Diefenbaker just made the country great. He didn't change a lot, and then through the years we've had change. But there's not much change from Reagan on. Even now, I mean, there's nothing they're doing that they haven't tried to do in the past and have failed just the way they're failing now. So that's just the way it works. Living in California, you sort of say there's, Canada has 37 million people in a landmass as big as America, and California, in a much smaller landmass, has 39 million. So it's like living in a separate, nice country, and this is the second best place to Canada. I still think Canada's number one minus the snow, and then you've got California, and then you've got the rest of the world, which is, I mean, certainly Europe is no better than the rest of the world, than the rest of America. I mean, they've screwed up so royally since 2008, it's beyond my understanding, but so it all runs kind of on automatic pilot, and here in California, it runs very well. There's nothing that one could point to as a big difference. Except for people out there in the Midwest who actually figured out that Trump could change something. He couldn't. He couldn't change anything at all. All he could do is just, like any promoter or con man, just con the people, just get in their face and yell and lie. And the same thing applied now in Canada, where they elected that idiot mayor of Toronto's brother to run the PCs in Ontario. It's not going to last because the woman did the best she could. Was she perfect? No, but the problems they've got in all of these places, and to a degree here in LA, is there isn't enough money to cover the cost of running a state or a province, no matter what they do. Mm-hmm. And more is needed all the time. Like as time has gone on, they have to replace all those pipes that they put in 1905, right?
Yeah.
Well, where does the money come from? We have to redo all the piping because it's all cracking up. Well, there's so much asked, and there's a limit to what they can get. So there's no immediate answer from anybody, and that's the problem that everybody from the guy who's now in charge of the PCs to Trump has found. There's no way to really do it, and his brilliant tax cut, isn't going to last here. As soon as a new government comes in, it'll be thrown out because they don't have the money.
No.
It's show me the money. I mean, there's only so much money, and if you don't have it, you can't have a mega accident take place. You've got to spend money on cleaning up after hurricanes and things like that. And that happened in Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico.
They need a lot more money than exists, and they're trying to figure out what they can do. Well, that's a very good example of America because America is living on credit. If you pulled in the credit of America, they couldn't pay it back. No one could the world. They'd all have to settle for so much on the dollar. Nobody gets excited about that anymore down here because everybody lives on credit. When they gave you a credit card, back in 1970, I think, or 68 when I got mine, there was a limit on how much you could have, what you could do with it, and it was a very well-run system. You had 3% interest and things like that. But now it's all gotten out of hand, and people just live on credit. So if everybody's living on credit, why does the credit of the country mean anything? Well, it doesn't. So I mean, I think that there's no easy way to do it, and when they do something outrageous, they're appealing to a very small part of America. But what else are they going to do? There's nothing else you can do. His trip to see, the Americans' trip to go over to Korea was a waste of time. Nothing's going to happen. China runs Korea, and when China wants to change it, it'll change it. For the moment, it's okay. And nothing's going to happen with that except it's just hype. And that's what the world now lives off on, hype. And the George Will, who is a conservative. Now, I'm not a big believer in conservatism or republicanism because it doesn't have any ethos really in the world we live in. At least the Democrats are trying to help people. These are just a front for rich capitalist pigs, the conservatives, even though they think they've got something with freedom and things like that. It's silly. But George Will is one of the better ones. I mean, he's the brightest, one of the brightest ones. And he said that, look, the world has changed, and the conservatives realize this because we don't have conservatism anymore. We have Trumpism. And we realize this, but if the Democrats are going to do anything in 2020, they need somebody in your face like Trump, because an ordinary person basically going out there and explaining what's going on is not going to succeed. They want to. Well, it comes from that great line from Jack Nicholson in that movie in 1990 with Tom Cruise. The truth, you can't handle the truth.
Yeah, A Few Good Men.
They don't want to handle the truth. The truth is, we're in debt up to our eyeballs. We're going to have to raise your taxes or you're going to starve. That's the truth. They don't want to hear that. They want to keep being mulled along by lies. Everything's going great. Trump was on today about how well the economy is doing, how well this is doing, and everything else, lying through his teeth. Well, they want to buy it. They buy it. They're desperate because they're not getting anything good out of anything. And they want to change it, but they don't know how, because only fools go into politics. There's no intelligent people now, because you have to have experience. You know, you can't just appear for 4 years and then become president, with the exception of a fluke, and that was Obama. You've got to have some connection to how it works, and then you'll be good. Like Jerry Brown was a great governor here because he's had experience for like 40 years. He's been a governor. He's been an attorney general. He's been a mayor. He's seen everything. So when he actually got back to being governor, he knew what he was doing and how it all worked and how the games work. The guy who was the what's his name in New York, the head of the Attorney General of New York, it all went to his head like it does to a lot of these people, like it could do to any of ours. I mean, you could be in the same situation as me. You never know until you get to be there. But somebody said to him, "You're such a great Attorney General in Manhattan. Why don't you run for governor?" He said, "Yes," and he became governor. And that's where it all collapsed for him. And the stress was so great, he had to self-destruct and go pick up hookers, and that was the end of him. Because you cannot go from one job to the other without experience in between. And he got to Albany in New York, and it was so corrupt. He tried to do what he did in New York. There was no way it was going to work. It's entrenched. That's what Jerry Brown knew. Jerry Brown knows how it works. To a degree, because he just happened to be brilliant, Obama did too, because he was a constitutional lawyer as well as spending 4 years in government up there. So he could at least play the legal games to get what he wanted to achieve achieved. You see, where Bush can't, because he's clueless, period. He is strictly a con man. But that's what America. There's a great series that I recommend to everybody, American Greed, and it's 2.5 hours about con men in America. And it's a great series because a guy with a great smile, who's very flattering, like Trump, goes and knocks on a door of a house, and when he leaves, he's taking his children, the furniture, the cars, and every cent the person's got, and the person's saying, come back, because that's America.
Yeah.
Because they are just waiting to be on every level, on the internet, everywhere, conned. And the cons are just, the fact people fall for them is sad, but they do. And they're very well worked out. So there you go. So nothing as much changed from the 30s. It was the same thing, you know. The con men were everywhere. It's all the same. Nothing much has changed, except here we have all the internet sources and the cable sources wanting to make something of it, so you'll watch and all of that. And they're party to it. They're as big a party to it as anything else, because if there wasn't news like this all the time, they would not be in business. CNN wouldn't exist if they just had news to tell. They've got to have scandal. They've got to have this, or they have to manufacture it. That's why the only reason the Kardashians or anything, because they were newsworthy. They could keep promoting them. They could bring them on, etc. It had nothing to do with the actual Kardashians themselves. It's what make them into somebody, so that people can grow up dreaming they'll be a Kardashian. You know, it's very sad. And they're party to it. They keep saying we're not, but they are. So if you know that, you realize that there's very little truth left, because it's all been bashed by basically greedy capitalist pigs. That's all. And sadly, too, in Canada, which used to be, up until Brian Mulroney, was a very well-run, legitimate country, and then they brought him in, and it just, collapsed because he was such a greedy capitalist pig. So that's unfortunate, and it's never really been able to recover.
Yeah. Going back to prom night, I think one of the funniest things that about that is that Leslie Nielsen did Prom Night and Airplane the same year. I just find that funny.
Well, it isn't, because what he was doing, it was the same thing. What he was doing in Prom Night was the legitimate Leslie Nielsen, which is what they hired him for. What they hired him for when Airplane came along, because I forget where it is, but at some point, he's got one of those kind of airplane lines about you're expelled or something, and that was the way he did everything. He was a wonderful actor, and it was right for the character in Prom Night. But then they started saying, well, what if it was a takeoff? And that's where it fell apart. And even in Prom Night, but actually in a way worked, even though it's over the top beyond belief. You've got the psychiatrist and the cop who talk about the guy who's the serial killer who's been released from jail and is passing through town as a possible suspect. And he said something. He said the psychiatrist said something to the effect, "It's right out. It would be a Leslie Nielsen line, or one of the lines out of Airplane. I don't know what a burnt to a crisp, mentally deranged psychopath is going to do when he's out of prison." I mean, that's what they would do in those movies. And Leslie was great at doing them. In this one, it was exactly perfect for what he had to do, play the teacher and all of that. And then he just flipped that to being the passenger on the plane. It was great. And then he became a comedy actor after that, and he was one of the nicest guys, just a fun nice guy.
Yeah, loved him.
He came to me and he said, I was doing a show with him for HBO, and he said, do you mind if I do it with an accent? I said, no, but what kind of an accent? So he did it with the accent. That's perfect. He was a very inventive guy, and it was perfect for the show. It didn't have to make any sense. It was just entertaining. That's a great actor and a pro.
You know, I just recently watched Humongous. I'd never seen it before, and I saw it for the first time. I'm going to tell you somebody in that I wanted to ask about, because I might reach out to her to see if I can get her on here, is Janet Julian. I liked her in it. What was she like?
Well, she left acting to become a teacher.
Yeah.
And she's a teacher now in Los Angeles. So she did several films, including this one, Humongous, and then one about gangsters in New York, and a couple of others, and then she went to be a teacher, and she was a very nice, terrific girl.
Yeah, she was a standout. Her and that little ball cap on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
well,
the great guy, and the great story about that is the guy who played the creature in it was a very tall guy, was a wrestler, and he liked to drink. And before he went out in the big climatic scene in the end where he's set up a fire, before he went out to do it, he had a lot to drink. So when we put him in there, we put him between fire bars. And after it was over, he was fine. But a couple of hours later, he was in agony because the fire bars had singed him. And all of that wrapping around where he was so terrific and so wonderful, it had singed him because he was drunk and he didn't feel anything. So he was quite willing to put his hands and things through the fire bar. We didn't want that. We didn't need it, but he had done it, so it looks incredibly real because it didn't get him till 45 minutes when it was over, and he said, my arms, my everything, because he was so out of it. There you go. Nice man.
Well, we're coming down on the 2-hour mark here, so I'm just wondering if, what's that?
No, fine. So I'll let you edit it down to whatever you want it to be.
No, but that's fine. I've done longer than that, but I was just wondering, what's in the future for Paul Lynch?
Well, at the moment, I'm trying to get a picture made. It's very difficult because it's not a conventional kind of superhero movie or anything like that, or action movie. It's kind of a thriller about an aging hitman and his romance with a couple of girls, and it takes place in the mid-50s in Hamilton, Ontario. And I'm hoping I might get somewhere with it because it's such a good twisty-turny script, and it's about a lot of things. But we'll see. It's a very uphill battle, but that's all right. That's what I've committed myself to doing because there isn't a lot of other stuff to do, and occasionally I get asked to do something oddly interesting, and we'll go out and do it. But for the most part, it's just trying to make this film, and it can take 20 years to make a film now. So I've got a lot to work on, but that's about it for the moment, and no real complaints.
Well, I appreciate Peter Foldy hooking us up originally, and still keeping me in the loop with you on your new number and a new connection.
Yeah,
So
talk to Peter, because Peter's been doing well. He did a script for a motion picture that they love, and they're going to try to make a biopic. And he's off to I think Oklahoma to make a movie for television in August. So stay in touch with him, because he does a lot more than me, simply because he hasn't done in the past as much as me. So he's doing quite well. So you might stay in touch with him. He'll have stories.
I'll definitely stay in touch with him, and I'll definitely stay in touch with you. I loved having you on here, and you know what? Fredericton welcomes you back anytime you want to come here,
No. I've been lucky enough to see the world courtesy of the motion picture business, and just been lucky enough to be in show business since I was 10 years old, basically, in one way or another. And it's been a great life. And Norman Jewison once wrote a book, something to the effect of, and he's a wonderful man, and truly did do great things for the business in Canada, and has made some wonderful films. But he wrote a book, "This Horrible Business Has Been Good to Me." Mm-hmm. My book would be "This Wonderful Business." I'm sorry, I've been very lucky to be in this wonderful business. That would be mine.
Well, I've been very lucky too, to have such wonderful talents like yourself to connect with me. And, sometime, next year, if you're doing anything, if you get your movie up and going, I'd love to have you back on, because, boy, you tell some great stories.
I'll be happy to talk to you anytime. And as I said, it was a shock to me when they called and said 39 years later we're going to have a midnight screening of your film, and 200 people turned up, all fans. So I just have to be very careful when I cross the road, because I'm just doing too well. It could. That's all. But thank you very much for your interest. And like I said, anytime you want to call or have a question or anything, because my only real hobby is the history of film and what it's all about. And I participated with a woman in writing a great book on Raoul Walsh, which is out there and available. And it's not only about Raoul Walsh, who was a wonderful director in the 30s and 40s, but it's about the history of movies himself, because he started in 1916 directing, and he finished up in 1964 directing, and right in 65 the whole business changed, but really the second time after sound, for a big change, when it became a business more about a story and character and having a ethos behind it, and being more like European movies were at the time. And the first one was a Warren Beatty movie that he made in Chicago about a comedian working for gangsters, and it was very much a European kind of movie. And that happened in '65, just as Raoul packed it in, and it was a whole different world then from what he had been doing for Warner Brothers. And not long after that, the studios changed hands, and all of that happened. But it's a really good book, and it's about the history of movies. So that's basically been my hobby, just learning more and more about how this business came to be and all about it. And the more you read about history, the more you see that it's basically not that different today than back then, except for almost everybody. It's a much better life than they had back then.
Before you go, I was wondering if you'd do a plug for my show.
Okay. Ready?
Yep.
Hi. This is Paul Lynch, director of Prom Night and the Star Trek series, saying you've been listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise. Keep listening.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Paul, for coming back on here. And, like I said, when you get your new project up and going, you're welcome to come back on. I'll reach out to you.
More that if you can run it somewhere else, I'll give you one more, which is applicable because I know about the sites here.
Sure.
Hi, this is Paul Lynch, director of Prom Night and Star Trek the series. You've been listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise, the place to go when you want information about the motion picture business.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Call anytime. Always nice to talk to you. Always have interesting questions. And like I said, anytime you want, just call me. You got my new number.
Absolutely. I will do that. You have yourself a wonderful day, and God bless.
Absolutely, and you can, if anybody that you know is really interested, there is a CD available, which I have, of the music from Prom Night. I didn't think anybody would be interested, but they certainly would. A lot of the 200 were, because they kept asking me where they can get it. And so if anybody wants to know, they can email me at my email address, and I will tell them.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely.
I just didn't think anybody was interested because they only put it out in Japan, but they were. So, and you mentioned music earlier. So anyway, take care of yourself. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Yep.